Hello everyone and welcome to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today we are here to discuss a brand new book, Powerful Moments, published by ArtScroll, a book that I was privileged to author. And the question was how to go about doing this interview. And after extensive discussions with the people at Kol Ram, they came up with this idea for us to interview each other, for me to interview myself, something like that. Thank you, Rabbi Yitzchok, for having me. You know what? On second thought, maybe there's a better way to do this. It was a good idea. We could have tried it, but this is going to get odd. I agree, it's going to get a little awkward. So let's try something else. How about if we have Reb Hananya Kramer, the president of Kol Ram Media out in Baltimore. He's actually the producer of our Inside ArtScroll program. We worked extensively together. Reb Hananya, it's a pleasure to have you here for this conversation. And I must say, before we start the conversation, that after this book has come out, I must have gotten as many comments from people about who's going to be doing this interview as I have about the book itself.
Well, Rabbi Yitzchok, thank you for having me have you on the show.
And I should say that you're in quite illustrious company because we got all types of suggestions as to who should be the interviewer for this program.
But no one was masking. No one was willing to do it.
I'm not exactly sure.
We got stuck with me.
We weren't sure which direction to go in. Some people suggested prior guests, Joey Newcomb perhaps, some others.
Yeah.
But we are privileged, I'm privileged, that you agreed to do this. And I'm excited to talk about this new book. It is a big milestone. And thank you again. And you're the host, so I guess.
Yeah, that's it. So
I'm not the one.
I'm in charge here, man.
Exactly. You're the one doing the talking.
Well, this is exciting. Powerful Moments, a new book by Rabbi Yitzchok Hisiger. I need to hear all about you first, though. I need to understand you a little bit before I can ask you a couple questions about this book. All right, the Rabbi Hisiger that everyone knows as the host of Inside ArtScroll. Who are you? Tell me a little bit about where you learned, about where your background is, about the family. I need to understand.
So who I am is still to be decided. You know, it's a work in progress. But a little history I'm happy to share. I was born 40 years ago on Tu B'Shvat, actually in Tafshin Mem Aleph. My parents are Rabbi Yisrael and Mrs. Raina Hisiger, today of Flatbush/Lakewood. I grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. I'm the youngest of 6. I'm actually the Ben Zekunim on both sides of my family, interestingly. So I'm really the baby of the family. And I have 4 older sisters, 1 older brother. And I'll talk about that because my brother has played a seminal role in my life as a role model, someone to look up to. And I was born on Tu B'Shvat, Tafshin Mem Aleph, not long after Rav Hutner was nifter. And my father had learned in Chaim Berlin. In fact, my grandfather, Reb Tzvi Yehuda Harry Hisiger, my father's father, had a very close relationship with Rav Hutner. So I'm named after Rav Hutner, one of the first babies in Chutz La'aretz to be named after Rav Hutner. Interesting tidbit. My grandfather's Mesader Kedushin was Rav Hutner. My father's Sandik was Rav Hutner. My father's Mesader Kedushin was Rav Hutner. I'm named after Rav Hutner, and my Sandik was Rabbi Aaron Schechter, the current Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Rabbeinu Chaim Berlin. And another interesting connection is that my grandfather, Reb Harry Hisiger, was one of the pioneers in East New York, pioneers as far as Yiddishkeit is concerned. And he was an activist. He didn't get married till age 40 in 1940. And he impacted a tremendous number of the youth in East New York, most prominently Lieutenant Birnbaum, who acknowledged to me when I wrote an article about my grandfather about 10 years ago that he was a shaper of many of the youth in East New York, Reb Moshe Swerdloff and others. And my grandfather somehow, despite being educated only in public school, he had a melamed, I believe, in the afternoon, but like many of the youngsters of his time, he wasn't zeichet to yeshiva education, but somehow he had a tremendous ability to recognize true HisHashgachah and connect himself to Gedolei Adar. And when he heard that Rav Hutner came to America with his Rebbetzin Masha and was staying at the home of his father-in-law, Rav Lifshitz, in East New York, he made his way over to Rav Hutner, to the Lipschitz house. And as the story goes, he found Rav Hutner reading the dictionary teaching himself English.
Wow.
And my grandfather connected himself to Rav Hutner and was instrumental in getting Rav Hutner his first job here in America. My grandfather was involved in the National Council of Young Israel, and through that he had a connection to Irving Bunim, who was the president of RJJ, and my grandfather was instrumental in getting Rav Hutner his first job as Menahel of RJJ. So they had quite a connection. And my grandfather, when he married my grandmother, Sophie or Shifra Friedland, they got married in the apartment of, and I'm just kind of to jog my memory here, they got married in the apartment of Rav Sender Lynchner, who was an Edom of Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich, and Rav Hutner was he officiated the marriage in that apartment. If I'm not mistaken, recollecting what I wrote, he wasn't officially clergy at the time, so he ended up being a witness on the marriage, but he was Masada Gedushin. And so there was a deep, deep connection between my family and my grandfather and Rav Hutner and later Yeshivas Rabbeinu Chaim Berlin. I was then named after Rav Hutner, so it's definitely a big schos.
There was a serious amount of name dropping you just were able to pull off just now into the family history, but that's incredible. Did your brothers, before you learn in Chaim Berlin, did the family maintain that Chaim Berlin connection?
So interestingly, the answer is no. My brother Reb Herschel, okay, whose name is Tzvi Yehuda, he's named after that grandfather, Reb Harry Hisiger. He actually later went to Tveres Elimelech, and we both attended the Yeshiva Torah Tamima because my father was the principal there. So I attended Torah Tamima. I should mention my grandfather. That grandfather was nifter in 1958 when my father was still a teenager. And just an interesting thing, very often in interviews, people will ask a guest, if you could meet one person, who would it be? And people give examples, if I could meet Rashi, the Rambam, the Vilna Gaon, if I could sit with Rav Shach for 3 hours, what would I give? But I'm not sure that I would be on the level to have a discussion with those people. But one person I would really give anything to sit with would be that grandfather, Rabbi Harry Hisiger. I heard so much about him. When I wrote the article about him a decade ago, I spoke to many people, including the Novominsker Rebbe, whose father had a shtibel in East New York. And my grandfather used to daven there. And they all described him as the most charismatic, warm, influential person. He was a powerful orator. He just had so many interesting things about him. He was a warrior for Shmira Shabbos at a time when many people were not keeping Shabbos. And I would give anything to meet him, to sit with him as a person who was a pioneer of Yiddishkeit in the early to mid-1900s. We were in Zeiche, and I'm sure that my father and his one brother, Reb Chaim Hisiger, my dear uncle, and my aunt, Mrs. Esther Gewurtzman, would surely give anything to sit with their father as well. And before I get into trouble, I should mention my mother's parents. You know the way it goes, but my grandparents, Reb Zev and Bessie Feller, who was known as Willie Feller, who were also pioneers in Coney Island. They battled for Yiddishkeit. They were makar of people. They were tremendous goyim lechesed. And I was zeicha to know them, although I was younger. As the youngster of the family, I was only a child and a teenager when they passed on. So I knew 3 out of my 4 grandparents. I was not zeicha to know my paternal grandfather. And I would have loved to meet him and hear his insight. How did he know when Rabbi Chana Wasserman came to America to connect himself to him? And I have letters in my possession from my grandfather writing about issues really before their time, before Rabbi Aaron Kotler was battling against certain movements, encroaching on pure orthodoxy. My grandfather wrote letters reflecting those very views. Where did he get that? Where did he get the knowledge? Where did he get the hashkafa from? I would love to sit with him, but
did some of it though? Has your father absorbed some of that? I don't know. I guess that focus on the klal, making sure that people should their shmiras mitzvahs, that passion.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. There is a component of it where my grandfather was very knowledgeable in the field of kashrus, and even though he was an engineer by trade, he had tremendous knowledge in the sciences. And that's something that my father perhaps inherited, because my father has worked in kashrus for many years, totally on a, not on a, I don't know if the word is professional, but he didn't do it as a career. My father did it almost as a hobby, as a passion. My father's been involved in kashrus for decades. So perhaps that's one area. Shmir Shabbos is not something that we, Baruch Hashem, grapple with today. But there's no question we speak in our family about my grandparents with tremendous reverence. And I don't know who's the one who said that in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from, something to that effect. So I still glean tremendous inspiration from my grandparents, and we're here today. So I went on, just to talk about yeshiva education, I went on to learn in Yeshiva Torah Tamima. And I was there from kindergarten all the way till post-Beis Medrash, till the Shir of Reb Shlomo Feivel Shustel. And I don't know if it's a bigger chiddush that I made it through Torah Tamima for 17 years, or that they put up with me all those years, but be that as it may.
I'm sure you were a model student.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So you were there by Reb Shlomo Feivel.
I went to Reb Shlomo Feivel Shustel where for a little over 2 years. Tremendous chus. And going to Torah Tamima, the dream was always to reach that plateau, Reb Shlomo Feivel Shustel Shir. And following in my brother's footsteps. Then I went to learn in Eretz Yisrael, where I learned by Reb Nechemia Kaplan. Reb Nechemia is the youngest son of Reb Baruch and Reb Vichna Kaplan, famed pioneers of the Beis Yaakov in America. And that was a
That's interesting. It seems like a little more of a unique path, was it? Or did you have a chaver that went with you?
No, I actually went by myself. Most of my friends went to Brisk. And it is a Kachim. Reb Nechemia had a Kachim-oriented yeshiva. We learned Kachim. And Reb Nechemia is the son-in-law of Reb David Soloveitchik. Oh, nice. And he's an American-born Rosh Yeshiva. So it was a unique combination.
Americans were in the yeshiva with you, wasn't it?
Yes. It was an American yeshiva. And I made tremendous relationships over there with new chaverim. It was a unique chevra of 35, 40 bachrim with Yungalite. Right. And it was a kind of change of pace. I came from Torah Tamima, which is a large yeshiva. And here I was in a smaller yeshiva where I knew no one. But I greatly benefited from that. And I learned by two people, Reb Shlomo Feivel Shustel and Reb Nechemia Kaplan, who are two of the most humble, self-effacing, some of the warmest people you could ever meet. And I'm grateful that the Rabbanu Shalom guided me the way he did to where I ended up. So no regrets. So I was in Eretz Yisrael from Sukkot after 9/11 till the following Pesach. So it was for about a year and a half.
Okay, and then from there to BMG?
And then I went to Lakewood.
Yep. Now, here's a question that you may have not seen coming. During that kufa, when you're in Eretz Yisrael, very often Talmidim will have some kind of a picture of where they're going to want to end up, right? Rabbanis, chinuch, professional, Did you at that point kind of have a picture of where you wanted to go?
So I did have a notion that I would go to Lakewood and that I would eventually either end up in the field of kashrus, because as I mentioned, my father's in kashrus, and I always had a great interest in it, or that I would become a Rebbe of some sort. I have a certain soft spot in my heart for Bachrim. I always thought I would work with Bachrim. Yeah. Now, I should mention, I will get into it, I was always doing writing. I was always writing. As a Bacher, as a youngster, later on. Interestingly, when I was in Eretz Yisrael, every Motzei Shabbos I would write a letter home, following in my brother's footsteps. My brother, when he learned in Eretz Yisrael, he would write letters home every week, recounting the things that happened in the week, the interesting people he met, and so on and so forth. And I kind of did the same thing.
When you say writing, you're talking about like with a pen and a piece of paper?
With a pen and a paper.
You don't have to turn on the pen. It just works.
Literally I would sit at a table in my dira. Yeah. And after a while, I started looking out for things to write. Stories, interesting people I met. The people I would go to for Shabbos meals and so on. And my mother began taking those letters, making photocopies, and giving them out to the whole family. It became a thing, Yitzi's letters from Eretz Yisrael. So I was doing quite a bit of writing then, obviously not on a professional level, but that was just an interesting tidbit.
Yeah. Can you attribute your great education at Torah Tamima with some writing skills?
That's a good question. Definitely. We got, my father was the English principal, so,
Great English department there. Great.
Full disclaimer. My father ran an excellent department, and he was actually consulted by many other yeshivas on how to do it. There's no question that I got an excellent education in Torah Tamima, both in Limudei Kodesh and Limudei Chayil. But as far as writing is concerned, a lot of the credit goes to my mother. During my Mesifta years, I went every summer to Camp Silver Lake. And every day, virtually every day, every other day, I would write a postcard home to my parents. Again, just a short synopsis of what was going on in camp. I was probably the only kid in camp writing postcards home at that frequency. And my mother would actually send the postcards back to me with my grammatical and spelling mistakes circled in red.
Like Horace.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, today, I don't know if that would fly, but that's really where it started. And I was always writing. I really was. I was always into writing. I must give credit as well to a friend of mine, Eli Bohm, who, when we were both in Mesifta and then in Beis Medrash, started putting out a weekly, at the beginning it was weekly, then it was bi-weekly, halacha newsletter. He was very into halacha, and he would write a summary of halachas on different topics, and he gave me the job of editing. Actually, a few times he gave me the schus of writing, so I wrote on topics of kashrus. I wrote articles on chalav akum, on gvinas akum, on yoshan, on bishul akum and pas akum.
These were in English, right?
In English. Very clearly written, reviewed at the time by Rabbi Yisrael Belsky, and we were mailing them out to shuls all over the United States. You imagine 2 bachrim in Mesifta / Beis Medrash. And that helped me hone a lot of my writing and editing skills. That's really where it started. So I was 17, 18 years old, and we were doing this. It was a project we undertook together, and I'm very grateful to him for that opportunity.
So, getting back to what I asked you about being able to see Alt Bacher, the kind of work that you would be doing. Well, maybe you didn't see it as a profession, but certainly you were actually laying the groundwork.
So I was, and if you would have asked me then if I would have viewed myself to become a writer or / editor, I would have said I would love to do this. I'm just not sure if I have the requisite skills to do it. Mm-hmm. So, I was still kind of getting my feet wet. If you would tell me, oh, you could work for ArtScroll, I would have said, where could I sign on the dotted line? But ArtScroll's ArtScroll, and at that time, I was just being honest about where I was as far as career is concerned.
Sure.
So,
all right. So before we get into the professional thing, so there was a tkuf of kail, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
I'm assuming. I'm assuming.
In Beis Medrash Gavaya, I was learning for a few years. Right. And shortly, not that long after my marriage, Rabbi Lipschitz from the Yated, who was my wife's uncle, and I should mention that when I came back from Eretz Yisrael, I went into the freezer, and then I was introduced to my wife. She was actually the first girl that I went out with. And my wife is Ita Bracha, a daughter of Rav Moshe Dov and Bashi Morgenstern of Monsey, and the granddaughter of Reb Yaakov Lipschitz and Reb Gershon Morgenstern, both very, very early pioneers in Monsey. And she's actually the great-granddaughter of Reb Lezer Levine, Rav of Detroit. And she's named after her grandmother, a daughter of Reb Lezer Levine, Rebbetzin Ita Bracha, an Isha Chashuva in her own right. And my wife's uncle, Rabbi Lipschitz, editor of Yated, knew that I did writing, and he asked me if I could help him out. At the time, he was kind of running a one-man show, doing a tremendous amount of work in publishing the Yated.
We're going back how many years now?
We're talking about now 2005.
Okay.
So I was at the time 24 plus years old. I was fairly young. And I started doing editing for the Yated. And I loved it. I loved the responsibility. And I'm truly grateful to Rabbi Lipschitz for giving me an opportunity. If there's one person within the realm of publishing who I owe my career to, it's Rabbi Lipschitz. When you have a passion for something, when you want to do something, and you know this from filmmaking, all you want is an opportunity. Give me a chance to show that I could do what I think I could do. And Rabbi Lipschitz allowed me to do that.
I'm sure you learned from him also.
I learned a tremendous amount from him, not only in writing, just in dealing with issues. And one particular thing that I'm very grateful to him for is that he allowed me to develop on my own. He didn't micromanage the way I wrote and write it like that. No, he let me do my thing. And that's a big compliment in the field of writing and editing. Some editors and publishers are very, very particular, and they'll say, my way or the highway. And Rabbi Lipschitz allowed me to develop, and he gave me great responsibility at a fairly young age. At 25 years old, he was basically telling me, I trust you to make this editorial decision.
Can you tell me the kind of work you were doing at the Yated? What was it?
He was sending me articles that were coming in from columnists. He was assigning me writing jobs. People would pass on, and he would give me the responsibility of writing an obituary, the letters to the editor of the paper. He would give me manuscripts, to decide on whether we should publish them or shouldn't publish them. And more than anything else, I would say there were probably 3 or 4 seminal events from which I gained tremendously working for the Yated. Number 1 would be the Rubashkin saga. When Shaul Mordechai Rubashkin story broke, at the time, we're talking about, 2008, 2007, I don't remember the exact year. People were reporting on it, but Rabbi Lipschitz was the first one to say that there's an injustice here, and I'm willing to put my newspaper, my career, my parnasa on the line to fight for the truth. And that's not an overstatement. It's very easy to look back now. Baruch Hashem, Shaul Mordechai is free. People came to realize the injustice, especially when very prominent people, governmental officials, prominent attorneys came on board. And it's very easy to look back now and say, oh, of course, the Rubashkin campaign, why wouldn't the Yated fight for a man who deserves to be defended? At the time, it was really not a simple matter. In fact, I remember one of the editorials I wrote the page 3 editorial after a pretty significant development in the case. I don't remember what it was. And someone came over to me and gave it to me over the head. Why'd you write this? Why'd you write that? Who said that the Yated should be defending? And so it wasn't a black and white matter at all.
Were you nervous?
I was not nervous because I was following Rabbi Lipschitz's lead. He was so confident and he had the courage of his convictions, and we all followed his lead as a group at the Yated. We knew that what he was doing was right. And then gradually we saw media, and then Askanim come on board, organizations. It became Klal Yisrael's project to stand up for Shaul Mordechai, but it was not like that from the beginning. And just to add to that, at the time that Shaul Mordechai was incarcerated, and Rabbi Lipschitz became his, prominent defender, so to speak, they began learning Chovos HaLevavos every week on the phone. And it was Tuesday night, and we were at the Yated making the paper, and everything would stop because the phone call was coming in from Shaul Mordechai. And it was surreal. We would sit, when I say we, myself, other editors, staff members, and we would watch as this man, who was facing a 27-year sentence, ultimately, was sitting and learning Chovos HaLevavos with Rabbi Lipschitz. It was like out of a storybook, a really unbelievable thing, and it was very, very inspiring to live through that. We really lived through it. And a lot of this was documented in the Yated, and ultimately now a book came out about the Rubashkin saga. And I just learned a lot from Rabbi Lipschitz, and he knew which battle to take on. I would say that there's a chachma in knowing who to fight for, how to fight for them. I should mention also that it wasn't only in the newspaper. He was devoting a tremendous amount of time privately, meeting with Askanim, raising funds, dealing with lawyers, and so on and so forth. And ultimately it was an effort of many people, but Rabbi Lipschitz's role in that can never be overstated, and that was one thing. Another seminal moment, I would say, saga, was when a very prominent moil was being targeted by New York State, and the Yated took on that campaign, and I remember being on conference calls and writing articles, editing articles, standing up for Bris Milah. Rabbi Lipschitz realized that when New York State was going after Metzitza B'Peh, they were really going after Bris Milah as a whole, and again, he led the fight for an age-old mitzvah and minhag.
I mean, you think that the purpose of the newspaper is to report the news, not to be advocating or fighting for causes.
True. So true. Rabbi Lipschitz really redefined what a Torah newspaper accomplishes. It's not just about reporting the news. And perhaps this is part of the mission he was given by Rav Shach when he started the paper. And hopefully this is something that I learned a little bit from. I doubt I would have had the courage to do what he did. I really took a tremendous amount of conviction, but I stood on the side and watched and tried to learn from it, and then finally, more recently, open orthodoxy, the battle for the purity of orthodoxy, and to call out those who are diluting orthodoxy, calling what they're doing orthodoxy when it's truly not orthodox, and that's something that he led the charge, and so these were, I would say, 3 pivotal periods of time that I learned a lot from him, and I'm very grateful to him for that.
But then came ArtScroll. We got to hear about ArtScroll.
You know, the opportunity to join ArtScroll is something that I cannot put into words for someone like me. I grew up writing. I grew up reading. I was a tremendous reader. And ArtScroll was, I really don't have words. ArtScroll was everything. ArtScroll was and is the pinnacle. And I'll give you a mundane analogy, and I hope you'll forgive me for it. Imagine a kid grows up as an avid Yankee fan. And he gets a phone call one day from the Steinbrenners, who say that, we would love for you to join our team, or we want to hire you. So this lifelong Yankee fan will say, sign me up. I mean, I'll be a ball boy. I'll clean the field. I'll clean the dugouts. Just give me the opportunity. And that's how I felt when an opportunity came my way. And the thanks is to Mrs. Chayla Kaufman, who I've done a lot of writing and marketing work with. And she knew that ArtScroll was looking for someone. She was really the shadchan. And she asked me if she should place a phone call to Rabbi Gedalia Zlotowitz. I said, of course. This is a great opportunity.
So what do you do for ArtScroll?
So that's a complicated question, because we do a lot of things.
Yeah, I knew that was coming, but
I do writing. We do tons of marketing. We'll get into the Inside ArtScroll idea, which kind of came into being shortly after I joined ArtScroll. In a nutshell, I would say that it's brainstorming and creatively implementing ideas to grow the ArtScroll brand. That's how I would synopsize it. And it involves so many different things. And I'm fortunate in a very unique way to sit in on all the editorial meetings, on all the marketing meetings, brainstorming meetings. It's an unbelievable opportunity. To sit down the hall from Rabbi Zlotowitz, Rabbi Gedalia, who is carrying on the legacy of his father, Reb Meir Zlotowitz, who I did know on some level because I published 2 books with ArtScroll before I was working for ArtScroll. And Reb Meir was so kind and generous to me, really in a tremendous way. And obviously I idolized Reb Meir. What he accomplished by founding ArtScroll is unparalleled. And Reb Gedalia is doing an unbelievable job. I've already learned so much from him, from his creativity, from his determination, from his clarity. He has a tremendous chush, an ability to know what's going to sell, what's not going to sell, how we should do things. So to sit down the hall from Reb Gedalia Zlotowitz, just feet away from the office of Rabbi Nosson Sherman, and down the hall the other way from Reb Shia Brander, a legend in his own right, and then the rest of the staff here, which Rabbi Sherman always reminds us, Reb Meir Zlotowitz called this a genius cluster, as you know. From Reb Eli Cronin graphics to all the other people, and I know I'm going to get myself into trouble if I mention certain people and not others. It's an unbelievable schus. I almost can't believe that I'm here. I really, it's a dream come true. No question about it. For someone like me growing up, writing and editing and appreciating the beauty, the magnificence, the precision of ArtScroll, and now to be here a little cog in the wheel. Just the fact that they let me into the building each day.
If they let you in, are you able to now see, are you appreciating more some of the attention to detail or some of the chachma that goes into the process?
Absolutely. So a few people ask me, what's the difference between publishing books with ArtScroll before you worked for ArtScroll and now that you're working for ArtScroll? And I'll give an example. 2 nights before this book, Powerful Moments, went to the press, Rabbi Shia Brander was sitting on the manuscript, analyzing it. He noticed that something was off with some of the fonts. No one would have ever noticed. But to have someone with Reb Shia's perfection, his eye for perfection, his eye for beauty, working on the book was the biggest compliment. And I should thank Mrs. Finkelman, who edited the book with Mrs. Firestein, and Mrs. Dicker, who did an amazing job paginating, all the people who made this book come into being. So being here and seeing it happen was unbelievable. I owe a Shavach Vayda to the Rabbi Shalom. He's taken me on a magnificent path from being a younger man, given a chance to write for a newspaper, to now being given a chance to be part of ArtScroll is really phenomenal, a dream come true, and I thank the Rebbeinu Shalom for allowing me to do it, and I daven that he should continue to give me the ability to contribute in some way to the ArtScroll brand.
I have no doubt you will. Prior to joining ArtScroll, I got the opportunity to kind of collaborate with you a little bit when we were working together on the HisHashgachah.
Yes.
That was shortly before your stint here, before your job at ArtScroll.
Yeah.
I shouldn't call it a stint, but so I of course was working on the videos, and you were working on the Hashem magazine, right?
That's correct. It is something that I'm very proud of, and ultimately something that came out of being in the field of publishing. Our mutual friend Reb Shmuley Rosenberg, who actually was a roommate of mine when we were both learning in Beis Medrash Kavaya in the Irv. I think it was room 278 where we were roommates. Who would have ever thought that years later, Reb Shmuley would be the marketing, what was the official title? The marketing officer?
Grand Poobah Wizard, I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
What Reb Shmuley did for the recent HisHashgachah at MetLife Stadium, and that he would coordinate for me to have the opportunity. Reb Ralph Reeder gave me the opportunity to direct the publishing of the Hashem magazine, which we have here.
Yeah.
This is the magazine that we put together. 330 plus pages of content, articles about the HisHashgachah, about Daf Yomi in general.
There's a good article in there about the guy who made the videos, I think.
Yeah, there is a pretty nice piece on Hananya Kramer.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was about. Yeah, right.
And it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. Yeah. I don't know who will do the next one, but this was a very, very unique opportunity.
I will say, you also were very helpful in the actual video production themselves. We had many, many meetings together with Reb Shmuley to discuss strategies and try to make these films for arguably the biggest live audience in Kol Yisrael's history.
It was an amazing experience. The script writing, if you remember, we were sitting in some hotel not far from MetLife Stadium.
That's right, in there.
Brainstorming.
Hilton Meadowlands or something.
Writing script for the videos that were shown
That's right.
to the audience. I remember also being given the job of coming up with the quotes that they put on all the billboards or those
The Jumbotrons?
the Jumbotrons outside of the stadium. Just being part of the production of the Siyam HaShas was an unbelievable experience.
No, there's some things that are legit historical. You know, it's epic in the real sense.
It really is. There's another thing here. I brought it just because it's interesting. This is a book that probably no one ever heard of. It was a labor of love that I undertook in 2007.
You show it to our audience over here?
Yeah, right here. It was a book that was put together in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Yated. And as an employee of the Yated, I felt that, this is something interesting. I wanted to commemorate 20 years of a Torah newspaper. And the idea was to collect letters of approbation, haskamas from 100 rabbanim, and then articles from lay leaders, and then pictures of covers of past newspapers. And we put together a book.
Is this Benimsa? Can someone get this book?
Probably if you contact the Yated office. Whoever sees it is amazed by it because it's really an interesting...
Is it on the Hisiger coffee table at home? I mean,
if I had a coffee table, maybe, but not really. It sits on the Svarim Shrank collecting dust. And I don't know, I don't know how many people have seen it because we kind of did it internally. We printed a couple of thousand copies. But it really is an interesting book. And it took a tremendous amount of effort and time. And at the time, I was just very, very driven to do it. So that was also an interesting project that we worked on, and here we are.
Well, and here we are here in the ArtScroll studio. I remember when I was the first time you and I got to have a meeting here in your ArtScroll capacity. So you shared with me this idea to do a series of shows. And at the time, I had already been talking about the idea of doing more studio kind of work at ArtScroll. But to be honest, it was so premature, the concept. All we knew is that I and Nahar have been doing work with ArtScroll for well over a decade. And 15 years now. So the idea of being able to, instead of schlepping up the gear and setting up the green screen, why don't we just dedicate some space? But space is a premium until we moved from Second Avenue and
right.
to
Rahway.
here in Rahway, New Jersey, to this magnificent and huge facility. So the idea was, let's dedicate some space for a studio. Now, when I was talking about dedicating space for a studio, just find me a corner of a room where I could paint the wall green. But it really didn't have a whole lot of, chachma beyond just that. Where would it be? And what would be the reason for it? How often do we actually need it? I mean, Rabbi Sherman does do his weekly Dvar Torah, his moments of inspiration, which, Kanai Nahar, we're now in year number 5. Wow. Every week, he does not miss a Dvar Torah on that week's Sedra. And in the past, I would come up, bring up the green screen. Rabbi Sherman would, knock out a few Divrei Torah, and we would just. So it would be great if we could do it here. So in talking with you, you had this idea for a show.
So one of the ideas that I pitched to Reb Gedalia when I first joined ArtScroll was to do interviews with writers as a means of kind of, my intro to the show. We say bringing the
Hello
books
again,
you read,
and welcome to Inside ArtScroll.
the books you read,
and
the people who write them come to life. And that was really the idea. The idea was we have writers, talented writers, or the protagonists of the story. In the case of, let's say, Rabbi Yitzchok David Grossman. That book was written by Reb Nachman Seltzer, but I interviewed Rabbi Yitzchok David, and the idea was to kind of give it a different dimension. And Reb Gedalia loved the idea. And when I heard that there's an existing studio at ArtScroll, at the time it was in this beautiful room, which, by the way, we could talk about the green screen in a moment. But it was a room that was suited for filming. And I hear that Reb Hanania Kramer is the one who films Rabbi Sherman every week. I said, we have it all here. Everything we needed was right here. And Reb Gedalia, I'm grateful to him not only for accepting the idea, but for allowing us, in working together, to kind of launch it in our own style, Again, not micromanaging how to do it, what to do it, kind of let it develop.
That's right.
By the way, I learned that, now I've referenced that a few times. I learned that great leaders empower people to do creative things and let them fly. Not micromanage. If you believe someone has the ability, let them do it. Yes, sometimes you have to make suggestions, but I'm very grateful to him for allowing us to develop the show or program or whatever it is. I thought of the name Inside ArtScroll. Everyone thought it was great. And I don't remember, what was the next step?
We just started doing it. I mean, it wasn't a, who's our first guest?
I think our first guest was Rabbi Zlotowitz himself with Reb Sruli Besser.
That's right.
It was the Rabbi Trank book, which ended up going on to be one of the best sellers, perhaps of all time. For sure, one of our favorite books.
That's right. And that interview was actually a challenging one because we were interviewing two people at once, figuring out how to do it on the fly. But the actual product looks like very similar to the ones we're doing now, which I get, no one can really appreciate how the fact that the technology evolved around us as we continued the process. So Baruch Hashem, be able to hold on to our first episode.
No, it's pretty impressive. I've gone back to watch some of them. And we should talk about the fact that I hosted the show altogether. I want to, full disclaimer. When I presented the idea to Reb Gedalia, let's do interviews, it wasn't a means of me getting a stellar. I didn't come in and say, I want to do a show, I should be the host. By no means. I just thought it was a great idea, and if they would have suggested that someone else be the host, no problem. I just thought it was a good idea. And I don't remember who it was, maybe it was you, who said, Yitzi, why don't you give it a shot? And interestingly enough, it's something that I've studied over the years, the art of interviewing. Mm-hmm. Public speaking, these are things that I take an interest in. When someone gets up to speak publicly, I'm immediately subconsciously analyzing their vocabulary, their cadence.
Wow, I do not want you in the audience next time I got to speak, but okay.
Listen, when Yeshver speaks, he's okay,
Yeah, he's okay.
Rabbi Pesach Krohn is his father-in-law, one of my favorite people. So it is something that I had an interest in.
And now that you've been doing this, for like a year and a half, you've been doing Inside ArtScroll episodes.
Sure.
You've gotten feedback, right? I mean, this has been
I got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of feedback to the style of interviewing. I do have a method in my interviewing. I know there are different styles. Yeah. Some hosts are more combative. I'm a little more easygoing about it. I've watched, the famous people like Larry King and others who were and are considered master interviewers. Right. And I picked up different, nuances of how to interview. And the main key, and I'm by no means, I'm not trying to come off as some kind of, professional interviewer, but I have studied it, and I think the main key, as simple as it sounds, is to let the people talk. You ask a question.
So you shouldn't interrupt. I'm just kidding. I'm trying to interrupt. Okay.
And by the way, sometimes I'll watch myself, and I'll interrupt the person, and I'll cringe. Why did I interrupt the person? Why didn't I let the person talk? But kind of, you're a facilitator. Yeah. So ask the question and get out of the way.
The way I look at it, because I don't have to interview in the same way you do, but I also, in my own capacity as doing documentary video, I find that I'm always representing the audience. Exactly. So if there's a question that's on your mind and you think it's going to be on the audience's mind, I think it's okay to sometimes interrupt.
I agree with that.
Why is he not addressing that point?
Let me clarify. It's in the flow of conversation. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm just talking off the top of my head. This is just, a little banter about interviewing.
We'll probably just edit this part out anyway. So.
If I ask a question, I'll try most of the time not to ask a follow-up 3 seconds later. Let the person get the thought out, and then follow up, like you said, a very good point. The audience is going to have questions. You want to ask the questions that the audience member would ask if they could. Right. No question about it. I think that's integral to the success of an interview. But just
there is a psychology in the whole thing, because you have to watch your interviewee as we continue to schmooze about interviewing. If they get into the zone and they're thinking about things, you need to stay on their wavelength. So this way they. I find whenever when we have to do work on tributes about people who've passed on, and there's an emotional component to it, I find that there's a certain point in any conversation, if it's working well, they get into that zone, and they're there, and you don't want to pull them out. That's when you ask the question something like, what do you miss most about not having that person in your life anymore?
Right,
and then you get the waterworks. And I know that this is like vicious, but at the same time it's good, makes for good videos.
I'll tell you another theory of mine, and I would love to hear from people who are watching this if they agree. I believe that if the guests are at ease and comfortable, then the people at home watching are also at ease. If you make a guest squirm, besides that they probably won't come back again, which may be fine, but the people at home might be squirming also.
So you're not into gotcha journalism?
No, not on Inside ArtScroll. You know?
Maybe for that.
Inside ArtScroll is more of a friendly confines where we're here to discuss, books that come out. I love getting into the details of the lives of the people.
Well, that's the thing. Most of your Inside ArtScroll, they're not really about the books. I mean, you do cover them, but it's the people.
It's about the people, and the truth is, I think I was born with a certain inquisitiveness. Yeah. I love to know about people. I could probably interview anyone here at ArtScroll. Seriously, anyone in the bindery here, I could probably pull out any employee, sit them down, and have a great conversation about where they come from, what inspired them, who inspired them, what makes them tick.
Well, that's why Inside ArtScroll episodes are not 4 minutes long.
Right.
They're longer because...
By the way, you're touching on something that we've discussed
internally. I know this is, people in the audience might think like, why do they make it so long? Well, it's been thought about a lot.
It's been thought about.
It kind of seems like it has a different purpose.
I have a proclivity, if that's the word, to go long. I could probably do most interviews for an hour in length, but the decision and the consensus is that an hour is a long time, and try to keep it as short and to the point as possible. Right. So we try to find a happy medium, because I like to get to the kishka, so to speak, of each guest.
Well, it does seem like it's working, though. I mean, saying, the feedback seems to be that you're doing it right.
Yeah, no, Baruch Hashem, the feedback is very positive, and I'm grateful to you and your team at Kol Ram for, we have Tim here, who's
shout out to Tim,
engineering, and Cullen and the rest of the chevra really do a wonderful job helping us through. And what people may not know, or they don't know, is that we actually do very minimal editing. What they watch at home of Inside ArtScroll episodes are almost verbatim the way it takes place, right?
That's
I mean, maybe here or there someone says the wrong thing, or we once had a guest who forgot to thank his wife. Yeah. So I think we allowed him to come back. And
by the way, thank you, dear. Really, thank you. This is okay.
But other than that, really, the way we do the interviews is the way people see them, yeah. And I like that because it's authentic.
Yeah, there's nothing fake about these interviews at all. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, everything is completely legit, including this beautiful room we're in. You gotta love this.
Take a moment.
Right,
since you're making a joke out of it.
Yeah, well, no, let's explain this, because I think this is actually
explain what a green screen is. Explain.
Yeah, you know what I'm going to do? Actually, I'm going to take out my phone. Okay, here is Rabbi Hisiger right here. Right, you see this green wall, and if you turn around, you can see the cameras, and then we can see ourselves up there on the screen. But this area is completely green without any seams. Even the wall's curved over there. But the idea is that when the computer can take out the green and replace it with a background. What we discovered, and what we've kind of been working on here at the ArtScroll Studio in particular, is that more an immersive 3D environment. So whereas this is not just simply a flat background, you can't just find an image like this on Google and throw it behind people, but Tim and Cullen and my very creative graphics team was able to create an environment with multiple angles to look at. So when the camera's on me and I'm talking, it's one background. Right. When on you, it's on a different background, because the computer sees it as a full 3D environment. So because of that, we're able to create spaces like this where the ArtScroll books, we're able to put whatever books we want back there, and those are actually legit books. Those are not, those, when I say legit books, they're actual 3D representations of actual real Sfarim. Kanai Nahara, over the years of working with ArtScroll, we have a very large library of ArtScroll digital assets, if you will.
But I've gotten a lot of comments from people about this rug right here.
The rug, right?
They want to know, where do you get the ArtScroll rug?
Yeah, where can I get an ArtScroll rug like that from my house?
And I try to explain that the rug doesn't actually exist, and that these beautiful Sfarim rugs don't actually exist. I don't want to burst anyone's bubble.
Yes, the Olam HaDimyon that we live in.
But it is a beautiful background that you've created, and the fact that we have a studio here at ArtScroll has allowed you
the HisHashgachah
to
is
do
incredible.
many projects.
I'll tell you, because of this brainchild of this show, thanks to you, And the fact that Reb Gedalia and the whole team of ArtScroll was willing to let us expand. The studio here is not just the painted green wall, but we have the soundproof room and the fact that we have the control room and a place for people to wait. It's a very comfortable place. We were able to let lots of organizations come to ArtScroll.
Right.
And then when COVID hit and we needed to create all this virtual dinner opportunity, so all these mezuzahs now had a place to come that was Bakovidik, not so far away. I used to schlep people to crazy from in the studios in the middle of nowhere. Here you come to ArtScroll. And if you're coming with people, then they get to potentially get a tour and see what's going on, where all their favorites farm or how they're being made. So this has been such hashgacha. It's been great for us. It's been great for Klal Yisrael. And the fact that I can spend my hours here when I'm my office away from Baltimore, it's been a real schus for me.
No question about it. It's been and the show has been a unique part of marketing ArtScroll, and in Hashem it should continue.
I see it like more than just marketing ArtScroll. It's a window into the. I've spoken to people who enjoy the show that they get to understand that, the challenges and the successes of these different authors. It's enriching.
There is
it doesn't feel like spin marketing. It's like a really understanding.
No, really, and people enjoy it, and I've gotten emails, phone calls, messages from people literally around the globe who watch this program.
See, this is marketing for the show, but
yeah.
No, that's okay.
But no, really, people really enjoy it.
Nice from entertainment. Nice kosher.
Yeah, great conversation, great guests. We've had some very special people come down. The truth is, I'm grateful to every single guest who has come down. There are people who made long treks. The Boston Rebbe was here. We did do the Rabbi Yitzchok David Grossman interview virtually because he's in Eretz Yisrael, which was a unique challenge.
I hope to do that kind of work with you more.
So we've done all different types, and I'm grateful to everyone for making it possible. I do want to mention, because I don't want to forget, there's another project that I undertook when I joined ArtScroll, another idea. I don't remember whose idea it was. It was probably bandied about even before I was here, but I was happy to kind of bring it to fruition, and that was creating a weekly Shabbos newsletter, where I adapt material from existing ArtScroll titles, which, Baruch Hashem, there's plenty to choose from, both from new titles and old titles. And by now, we're printing thousands of copies of this newsletter every week. It's going out to hundreds of shuls throughout the United States.
If I didn't get it in my shul, how do I get it?
You could email me, Hisiger at artscroll.com, and we'd be happy to add your shul to the list. It's gratis. You
don't charge for this.
We don't charge for it. And the feedback is...
There's something people say over the Shabbos table.
Divrei Torah,
beautiful
stories, something for children. And again, I want to thank Reb Gedalia, because when the idea was discussed, Reb Gedalia said, go for it. And Mrs. Aviva Cohen here at ArtScroll designs it. And we print it on site. And Reb Aaron Zlotowitz, who helps me with so many things here at ArtScroll, really is my right hand in terms of getting it out and making sure that it's done in a timely manner. And I'm very grateful to Reb Menachem and Bina Bronstein, who are the sponsors week in and week out. They enable us to provide this for free to the community. And right now we're reaching hundreds of shuls. I have a dream of reaching 1,000, 2,000 shuls eventually. Virtually not a day goes by that I don't get some kind of request from a shul.
Beautiful. Really?
We start off with 10 copies. If someone needs a little more, we're happy to accommodate. And I hear about it. I hear about it all the time. I took a trip to Florida a couple months ago on behalf of ArtScroll. We met with some shuls there, and it was amazing to see the newsletter sitting there, in the shul, people picking them up and reading them. So
you walk over and say, "Look at this!"
it's a special feeling again. Just to be able to have the opportunity to do that, to take the ArtScroll material and get it out there to a wider audience. We allow people to feel uplifted, to have something to say at the Shabbos table.
But Rabbi Hisiger, I heard you wrote a book, right?
I did write a book.
or a new book, I should say. Powerful Moments.
Short stories.
Okay.
Which is there is an interesting history to my short story writing, which is kind of instrumental in understanding how this book came about, how my two prior books, Food for Thought 1 and 2, were published. It was at some point I don't know how many years ago, where I just had a feeling inside of me that I wanted to use my writing to empower people, to uplift people, to give them positivity. You look in the media, online, elsewhere, there's a lot of negativity. Sure. I just felt like everything negative about Klal Yisrael, you'll find. Not enough positivity. I know it sounds like so basic, but that was the feeling I had. And I started a column called Food for Thought in the Yated, a weekly column, just writing short stories. In fact, I had a friend who told me, Yitzi, I read your column when it's 3 paragraphs. If it's anything more, I will not read it. Like, the idea was for it to be short, true, sweet, to the point, and with a message. It has to have a message, something to take away. And I just started writing, and I would look for stories. I would look for them in Svarim, and Lashon Kodesh. I would look for them in books. And then what happened was, in short order, people started sending me stories. I wasn't even soliciting stories at that point. But people were sending me stories, and people would say, you know what, I have a good food for thought story. Like, when people would tell me that, I was like, okay, so you understand what I'm trying to craft. It was a brand. And that meant a lot to me. When people started calling me and telling me that they have a story for me, that was a validation. I said, okay, I think we're onto something. And the way it appears in the paper every week is as a short story in a box. And some weeks I'd have 2 stories, 3 stories, 4 stories. And people would ask me, why don't you just make a full page of the stories? And I said, no, there's a method to the madness. It's short and it's in a box. People don't feel overwhelmed by it, even if they don't have time to read anything else, because people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. They're going to have time to read this. And this went on until I decided to compile them and add new stories into one book and then another book and then this book. And I believe that over the years, the stories have only gotten better and better because I've become more selective about what type of stories I'm going to publish.
Stylistically, it's similar to the Food for Thought series?
Yes, I think that though the selectiveness as far as the stories are concerned, like I said, I just became more picky. A lot of Gedolim stories start sounding similar. Mm-hmm. So if I have one story about a Gadol and then another story that's very similar in nature about a different Gadol, I probably won't publish it. I want something fresh. I want something new.
You mentioned also truthful and authentic, and I think that's a big thing today.
100%.
So how do we go about that? Is there a verification process? Like, what
how do you determine the veracity?
Someone tells you a great story. Okay, yeah. I mean, I can't ask Rav Chaim Eisner if it really happened. He's not here now.
True. So older stories, you can't do anything about it. You try your best. If you know that it's published somewhere in Lashon Kodesh, in a Sefer, you'll look it up. But stories that happen to contemporary people, I'll always track down the source. Okay. In fact, very interesting, just recently there was a story that made the rounds. It's not important what the story was. Mm-hmm. And quite a few people asked me, did you hear the story about so-and-so? I didn't see it in Food for Thought. Why didn't you write it? And what happened is that I called 10 different people. I even spoke to the person who shared the story on the Kolmavasser hotline. I tracked him down and I asked him, who's the source of the story? And he himself could not point me to the source of the story. So I never wrote it. Even though it's a great story. And it made the rounds, but so be it. I'm going to try my best. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. You know the way stories are. Even the person who it happened to will tell it over differently than someone who's watching the story happen. And you can only try your best. But what I do try when I write stories is to take notes when the person is telling me the story. I'll write it up and then I'll email it to them to review, if I can. And this way, the stories are as accurate as possible. Right, and these stories in powerful moments are about real people. And what we did was here, like I did in Food for Thought too, was put in pictures. If you look in the book, you'll see pictures of some of the Gedolim and some regular people. I have a story in here about Shlomi Dax. We have a picture of him as well.
That's actually kind of unique. Most of the
many storybooks don't.
Storybooks don't have it. Yeah.
You know.
But, so the idea is the pictures help make it feel more real, more
make
comes
it
to
more
life.
real. It draws people to the
Well,
stories.
describe me who you think your audience is here. Who's the target? Who would appreciate these stories?
Really anyone. Men, women, children, bachrim. I hear from everyone. I'll tell you something interesting. You talk about audience. The biggest compliment I get is when I hear from very prominent people. We're talking about leading Rosh Yeshiva Gedolim who tell me that they read the books. Sometimes I'm taken aback. One of my biggest fans, who's not here with us anymore, was Reb Moshe Goldberg. Reb Moshe Goldberg was a Maggid Shir in Yeshiva Gedolah of Toronto. I did not know him at all. One day I get a phone call. He had an issue with a story I wrote in the newspaper, that is. And he gave me some kind musar. But then he was mechazik me. He said, the reason I'm calling you is because I read your stories every week. Now, Reb Moshe Goldberg, for those who didn't know him, and by the way, I never met him, but I spoke to him many, many times. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. On my phone, which I don't have with me, on my phone I have a voicemail that Rabbi Goldberg left me in 2018. I never erased it. He called me to thank me for a story I wrote that he felt was very, very important. And he was just calling to give me chizik, and I never erased the message. It meant so much to me. Rabbi Goldberg is a person like pasuk puma megir, so he learned Torah the whole day. You want to hear something interesting about Rabbi Goldberg? And this is a story I once wrote. I don't know if it's still there, but he lived in Toronto. His address in Toronto, when you typed it into Google Maps, what came up was a picture of his house. I think it was August, whatever year it was Bein Hazmanim. In the picture, you see Reb Moshe Goldberg sitting on his porch with a pile of Svarim next to him on Google Maps. And there was something I wrote. It wasn't a story per se, but it was a point. Everyone knew Reb Moshe Goldberg, Bein Hazmanim, would sit on his porch with his Svarim next to him. And I brought out a lesson. I said like this. If Google Maps took a picture of us at any given time, what would Google Maps find us doing? Reb Moshe Goldberg, Google Maps found him sitting Bein Hazmanim and learning. It was a Musa Haskell. You know, Chazal tell us there's an Ayin Raya, there's an Oizen Shemas. What are we doing at any given moment? So that was a lesson that I once brought out. But Reb Moshe Goldberg was a tremendous source of chizuk. Here he is, tremendous Talmud Chacham, Mechaber Svarim. Again, someone who spent his days learning Torah. Again, those who know him, who knew him, won't be surprised. He had an unbelievable ahavas HaTorah. I can't describe what it was like. And here he is calling me and telling me to keep writing stories. So people like that really spurred me to keep on going. And the fact that people still send me stories, just a tremendous chizuk. And I should say that I didn't invent the genre of short stories. It's not, I didn't reinvent the wheel. There's someone named Rabbi Pesach Krohn, who I believe you know quite well.
I've heard of him.
Your father-in-law kind of was a pioneer in that. Rabbi Yechiel Spiro, my good friend, Rabbi Yomer Przansky, they write short story books that are bestsellers. Make sure that you have every one of their books. What I do a little differently is that a lot of my stories in this book, not my stories, but stories that people give me, are vignettes that maybe would not fit in other books. Some of them are shorter, some of them are more to the point, where the lesson is almost as important as the story. And so you could pick up this book, Powerful Moments, and turn to any page. And you'll be inspired by a story. You could read it. There's no, you don't have to read it al Hasider. But like I called the subtitle, Stories to Ignite Your Spiritual Flame. You'll walk away feeling better about yourself, better about your mission, better about your clarity of being Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, about using your time wisely, whatever it might be. That's the goal of...
You organized it according to topic?
Yeah, it's organized according to
topic. If I need to
come
up with a speech and I need a good vignette, I'll be able to find something to connect to a topic?
Hopefully you'll be able to find something. Talking about validation of people reading the stories, every Yomim Nairam I get a call from at least one Rav. I need a Ne'ilah story. I need a Kol Nidre story. And I always say, how many Kol Nidre and Ne'ilah stories are there? That's like hard. But people do call me often or email me and say, I'm speaking, do you have a story on this and this topic? And I try my best to share, what comes to mind. I'm not so good at finding stories on topic. Actually, my brother, Reb Herschel, is much better at it than I am. And I should mention my brother for a second, because besides the chizik that he gives me and the fact that he's a prominent Rav today, a Magachir and a Masifta, and a fount of Torah knowledge and stories. If I ever run out of stories, I could just pick up the phone and call my brother, and he'll probably take care of me for a few weeks till I get new stories. But my brother's a tremendous role model in my life. And I hope I'm not embarrassing him by saying this, because I'm not saying I've lived up to his stature, but having an older brother who is a Talmud Chacham and with tremendous insight, clarity, just his smarts, his intelligence, it made a tremendous impact on my life. I would say that in my formative years, having an older brother to look up to, he was probably the most influential figure in my life. So I'm very fortunate to have, and I only have one brother, so I'm not worried about any of my other brothers being jealous. And my sisters, I think they're okay with it. I look up to them also, but my brother we all look up to him, and I'm very grateful to him for his guidance, for his chizik, for his stories, for everything.
Rabbi Hisiger, this has been fun. I think this is it's wonderful. Look, it's such a schus to be able to do something professionally where you're connecting to so many people, you're making a genuine difference, right?
There's no question about it. There are very different methods of creativity and reaching people. Writing, music, which, by the way, we could talk about also.
Oh, that's right. You were on an album, right?
I was.
So I know we have to wrap up soon, but just tell me a little bit about your musical.
It's very interesting. When growing up, I had a passion for writing, and I also had a passion for music, or maybe it was the other way around. I don't know which one was bigger. I love music. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I love music from when I was a very young child. And by the way, I attribute a lot of that to my brother also. My brother has a great musical ear, and he introduced me to music at a very young age. I grew up listening to probably Mordechai ben David, Avram Fried, Regesh, which my brother was a huge chassid of, Miami Boys Choir, and the music of A.B. Rottenberg. Journeys, Dveikus, later Leva Nefesh, things like that. I was growing up post-Kalbach, pre-today's music. I would say those were the 5 main musical influences. When I was a young boy, my brother used to actually take me to the Regesh Kumsitzen on Chalamoid in Rabbi Sprott's house in Flatbush, later in Reb Luza Brott's house. And he gave me an appreciation for that authentic music of Reb Shmuel Brazil, which till today I can't get enough of. So I grew up loving music. In fact, you're going to laugh at this. Here's a tidbit probably most people don't know. But my career, so to speak, started when I was 4 years old. And my mother's very close friend, Cheryl Noble, was producing 613 Torah Avenue with Mrs. Rivka Newman. And there was an opportunity presented, how would you like to appear on 613 Torah Avenue? So at the time, we had records in our house. And I remember I was very scared because how are they going to squash me to fit into the record?
Yeah.
I remember having some kind of thought, but then they explained to me that no, it's fine. And there's a line on 613 Torah Avenue, I think, for the album on HisHashgachah, where a cute little boy says, "If you please, some Eli Deli, Canadles made from matzah meli." And that young child is yours truly. So that was the start. Not really music, but I guess that genre.
That's fine.
And later on, another funny story I'm just thinking of. I loved Avram Fried, like I mentioned, and around the year 1 was the album of the time, and I felt that I should be singing with Avram Fried, right? I mean, it's only right. So I took a cassette tape, because that's what we listened to then, and I put it into a tape recorder, and I think I put tape on top of that little tab in order to allow it to record.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think that album I think the song that I decided to sing was Yismechu. Yismechu v'malchuscha. And I started singing because I was going to sing with Avram Fried, without realizing that, no, I was singing over Avram Fried. So we had around the year one with Avram Fried and a little Hisiger by Yismechu. But anyway, to fast forward, when I was a bacher in Camp Silver Lake, a friend of mine, Reb Chesky Slamowitz, and later Reb Yisrael Yeager, Reb Chesky Gross, and some others, we got together and we created a non-professional album of songs that we composed, and we sang, and we sold it in camp for tzedakah, and we did it for several years. And after the third year, I was always the creative type and thinking big, and I was saying to myself, some of these songs should really be on a professional album, and maybe even we should sing on the album. But I took the album, I made copies of it, and I mailed it out to basically every Jewish music producer in America.
Great.
Could you imagine? I was a bacher in my teens, and every producer, every singer who I could think of. And before I knew it, on my home answering machine, I had some messages. No cell phones in those days. And one of the people who left me a message was Reb Mendy Werdiger. Reb Mendy Werdiger of the Werdiger Mishpacha fame, brother of Mordechai ben David, son of Reb David Werdiger, a Baal Menagin par excellence in his own right. Reb Mendy is fantastic. And he calls and says, he's Reb Mendy Werdiger from Aderet Music. He loved the album. He would love to speak further. I couldn't believe it. I cannot believe it. I thought it was a fabrication. Anyway, to make a long story short, I ended up going down to Reb Mendy, and I met him, and he told me he loved the sound of the album, which we call Tachlis. It wasn't my name. It was, I think it was Reb Chesky Slamowitz's name. And he said, this is really great. It's yeshivish music. How about if we produce a professional album? I was tickled pink. And I remember going back to yeshiva to announce that Mendy Werdiger agreed to produce Tachlis professionally. I still can't believe he did it, by the way. And he got Shlomi Zeiger as the arranger, and this is going back.
It happened.
It happened. It happened. In fact, we have it right here. This album, right here, Tachlis, and I sang on it with 3 others. 2 of my compositions appear on here.
This is awesome. And what year is this? Like how long ago?
This is 2001. So in September 2001, at the time of 9/11, I recorded the vocals. And then the others recorded their vocals, and I sat with Shlomi Zeiger. We chose the songs, and he wrote the arrangements, and we did harmonies. I remember Reb Sruli Werdiger, who today is a famed Baal Menagin, and one of our favorites, actually sang in the choir at the time. I don't remember how old he was. It was an amazing experience. So there we were. An album came out. I went to learn in Eretz Yisrael that Sukkos, and the album came out while I was a bacher in Eretz Yisrael.
Did you still see this as a hobby, or did you potentially think this might become a career?
So it's funny. I never really saw it as a career. First of all, I never thought I was really good enough to become whatever it is that you become. I don't know what you become. Number one. Number two, I didn't envision myself as a performer. There's something I like to say. Any bacher growing up today, singing into his deodorant bottle in his dormitory room, belting something out, thinks that he's going to be the next Shweki or the next Shmili Younger or whoever it is. The Avram Frieds, the Mordechai ben Davids of the world, and the other the young singers. How many people wake up in the morning, a bacher, and say that they dream of being the next Rabbi Pesach Krohn or the next Rabbi Nosson Sherman? How many people wake up in the morning and say, I want to be the next Rabbi Nosson Sherman? I don't know how many people. There aren't so many writers. It's unfortunate. I think in order to have readers, which is in the best interest of ArtScroll, I think we need to cultivate a young generation of writers.
That's a good point.
It's not a strong point, but you're asking me, did I ever think of going into music? And the answer is really no, but I still love music.
Yeah.
I love it. I listen and
Came through on your Inside ArtScroll episode with Joey Newcomb.
With Joey, we sang. By the way, can I mention something funny about that? Joey came down for an interview. We discussed nothing beforehand about what we were going to be recording.
Right. Certainly not the books he's written for ArtScroll because he hasn't.
No. We actually interviewed him because he worked on a project with the Rabbi Trank book. He did a video.
That was what it was. That's right.
So I sit down in that chair. Joey sits down here. His guitar, I told him to bring his guitar, maybe play for us. And you were fiddling around with the cameras. And I said to Joey, this is like a baltashkas. You have a guitar.
Right.
Let's sing a little. So he pulls out his guitar. You know Joey's the most easygoing, sweetest guy around. And he said, of course. So we start singing. And you stop motioning to me from your window that this is really beautiful. Keep singing. And this was totally impromptu. So Joey and I are singing and doing harmony and this and that, and you motion that you're starting to film. So you started filming, and that's why that episode of Inside ArtScroll starts off with us singing. It was totally unplanned, and that's why if you go back and watch it, I laugh and I say to Joey, are we really doing this? I meant that sincerely. Where did this even come from? And we ended up going through the whole interview, singing and talking. Anyway, it was
much fun. It's great.
It was a lot of fun. So the medium of writing is definitely something that I've put my heart and soul into, and I cherish it, and I appreciate the opportunity for ArtScroll to publish this book. And I don't take it for granted. I wrote to Rabbi Brander and Rabbi Sherman and Rabbi Zlotowitz. I don't take it for granted that just because I work here that they printed this book. I'm humbled, I'm honored that they agreed to do it, and I hope that people are inspired by it, by the stories, and if people have more stories, I'm always open to hearing them, but it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about it.
Yitzchok, this has been so nice. You should only be zeicha to continue to use all your kaiches, your talents, your creativity,
thank you,
and to affect so many people in Klal Yisrael, to inspire them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you again for everything you do for Klal Yisrael.
Thank you for inviting me to invite you to be on your show. This is so much fun. We have to see if the next Inside ArtScroll, if I'm just going to take over because I'm having a blast.
I was going to say that you shouldn't do too good of a job because then I'll be out of a job.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think you did a fantastic job. So if I'm ever not available, we know.
We'll see if you send emails to Rabbi Hisiger about how great the episode was. Make sure to tell them that the guest host is...
Thank you. Thank you for facilitating this conversation. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.